make in case building and how to avoid them and how to deal with them. Okay, so the structure of the workshop will be as follows. Firstly, we're going to just give the brief recapitulation of what an argument should contain. Secondly, we are all going to make an argument, and thirdly, we're going to try to improve that argument so it gets much, much better, right? Then we're going to see what we did and how you could apply that for some other cases. And then if you have some more time, we're going to have some more comments. As with Melda's workshop, if you have any questions, please feel free to interrupt me, just raise your hand or something. Doesn't matter. If I talk too fast or if you heard already something or something like that, also feel free to signal to me. Okay, so firstly about arguments. Can anyone give me just briefly what one argument has to contain? What are the parts of argument that you need to have?
I'm not sure if I'm going to talk about the argument or just the whole case as such.
No, about an argument in particular, okay?
Okay, you give the fallacies.
Okay.
You give the explanation of the fallacies. You can give some examples of why this already does exist and why it's valid. And then just bring all that back to the... Yeah, that's the classic case. It does not always work, but that's the most classic.
Okay, so we heard we have like claim, right? Explanation, example if it is applicable, and impact of the argument, right? Do you have some other like format of arguments you heard of? Okay, I think you're correct. I think that we can just generalize this to say that an argument has to have three things. One is the claim, where you give in one or two sentences like what you're going to talk about. Second part is why an argument is true. Like, particularly why argument on our side of the house is true and not on the other side of the house. So, on the comparison, why we need to focus on the comparative on that part. Thirdly, why argument is particularly important in this debate, right? So, we need to have a claim, what we are going to prove. Then secondly, why that claim is true. And thirdly, why that claim is important in the debate. So far, so clear, right? Cool. Let's talk about claim. What do you think the claim has to have? What, if you would want to give someone an advice of how to make the most effective claim on the argument, what would you say?
It should be short.
Yeah? So it should be one or two sentences max, right? What else?
It should be specific.
What do you mean by should be specific?
Well, when you give your claim, it means that this claim is going to be the main vector or direction of your whole argumentation in your case.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Also, it should probably indicate to the people what you are going to talk about it in your argument, right? So, usually, in that one sentence, you would ideally give people an idea of what your next 2 or 3 minutes of speech will be about. Why is that important? Because judges usually are not sometimes they're lazy, sometimes they're not as experienced, etc. If you give them a claim where you give them what you're going to talk about in 2 or 3 minutes, it is much easier for them to follow you. And also, if you miss some part of the analysis that might be intuitive to them, they will be more prone to finish them for you rather than if you don't do that. So try with claim to be as concise as possible and to explain in the claim what the impact of your argument is going to be, where you headed with that argument. So for example, you won't say, I think that the bad claim is, so this is an argument how this impacts kids, right? Because with that claim, judges don't know what you're going to talk about, right? But if the claim is, here how this, like our side of the house, helps kids get better grades in school, then you are aware what exactly I'm going to talk about, right? And then, or like exactly what I'm going to talk about, and it's much easier for you as a judge to follow me, etc. So that's about the claim. Secondly, why argument is true? What would you tell people that they should focus on in that part?
Probably provides an example.
Can you just speak up, sorry?
Probably would provide an example.
Yes, example. What else? Okay, so
Made an analogy like similar.
yeah, analogy to something similar, especially if you're lacking the example, right? Excellent. What else? Cool. So you provide an example. So let's say the debate is about legalization of drugs. And then you are a prop, you provide example, this worked in Portugal. Then you come up and say, this didn't work in Cambodia. How the judge can solve these two examples?
You can't.
Sorry?
You can't.
It can't. So, what else do we need to give except of the example? Examples are important, so the judges know that our case happens in the real world. That it's not some just imagination we are just bullshitting around, but rather that it has some like evidence that it does happen in the real world. What else would you provide in order to explain to the judge that your example is more like likely example in random scenario?
Show the probability of it happening under certain conditions.
And show the comparison between the analogy which you gave and the actual problem that you're trying to solve. Like showing that the things that are happening will happen exactly the same way, and it will be good or not.
Okay, so let's first deal with the first thing that you heard. So you should show that your argument is more probably going to lead to example A rather than B. How do you show those issues? What is the most important thing you need to analyze within the argumentation?
The chain of arguments.
Sorry,
The chain of arguments.
the chain of like the flow of logic. You mean like yes, but how do you do that? How do you prove that something is going to happen? What do you analyze? So it's very difficult to generalize something to all examples, or to generalize something to all people, or to generalize something to the members of a certain community. What you can do is talk about a couple of things that might apply to the most of the cases. One of them being incentives. And this is very important. Usually when people are analyzing arguments, they don't analyze how that particular case, either on prop or op, is changing the incentives of people. Why? Because usually you can say, like, for example, when people are under pressure, they act like X, right? That is like simply certain generalization that is applicable to many situations. If you are able to provide something like that, it is much easier for you to have the logic that you're talking about, right, that is supporting that argument. So try to analyze how incentives of the relevant stakeholders, of people who are affected by the policy, is changed under your side of the house. If you're able to analyze that, you're usually going to be able much more to analyze why your argument is true, right? Why something is going to happen. Secondly, I think you should try to think about what is going to be contested from the other side of the house. This is something that Melda was also talking about in her workshop, right? So if you think that there is part of argumentation that probably everyone is going to agree upon, this probably requires much less analysis than the part of the argumentation that people are going to contest much more about. And thirdly, try to find inherent things about certain part of the argument. So for example, if the motion is about religion, try to find inherent things about religion. So for example, religion is important to people. Right, it makes sense. Religion is one of the most important, if usually not the most important identity to many people. Right? Thirdly, religion gives you, the purpose of life, gives you moral compass, how you should behave, how you shouldn't behave, punish you for bad behavior, or give you rewards for bad behavior. Sixthly, religion gives you some sense of community, right? All of those things probably can apply to most of the religions. Like most of those things can apply to most of the religions. Right? If you analyze those issues that are inherent to certain parts of the motion, it is much easier for you to make an argument. So if you want to make an argument in the debate that says that we shouldn't offend religious people, you can use all these stuff I was talking about to explain how when people are offended, that leads to discussion that is not balanced, but rather that is very, very emotional and doesn't lead us to anywhere, right? If you want to make an argument that offending, or in some other religious debate, let's see, if you want to make an argument that people should choose Pope, like on elections, you can use these things to say this is very important identity for people, and therefore people have a right to choose who is going to lead them, at least in the Catholic Church or something like that. So you know what I'm saying? Try to think of inherent things about that motion or about certain aspects of that debate, and why it is religion in the motion and not something else. This will improve significantly your argumentation, because you will see why CA teams put something like that in the motion, and you will be more able to give better explanation for your case. Okay? So this is for what about argument? Why it is true on our side of the house, not in the other, right? Third part of the argument is why argument matters particularly in this debate. Now, people generally need to explain why arguments matter, right? Why they are important. Why do we care about that argument? If you explain that argument is true but no one cares about it, you cannot win with it. Equally, it is the opposite one, right? So, it is very important to explain why they matter particularly in the debate, or ideally, why they matter more than the other arguments. Why they are the most important argument that exists here. There are a couple of ways how you can do this. One is through certain characterizations of explaining, like, what kind of situation this debate is about, right? So if debate is about offending, like this house to ban offending of religion, if that is debate, probably the characterization that you provide in your argumentation about backlash might be of who are the people we're talking about. So it's not like random people who don't care about religion. It's not people who are religious but you don't really go to church, or like just religious for the, like, you know, just say that they are, but they don't really are investing in this. No, we care about people who are deeply religious, who are where religion is their primary identity. They are the most important in this debate because they are the ones who are most likely to change their behavior in certain aspects, right? So one way how you're going to explain why your argument is particularly important is to try to characterize debate, either who is the most important in this debate, or in which situation this debate makes most sense, or something like that. This is particularly important in debates that are wide, in in a sense that you can talk about everything. So here's the example. So it is from this Euros Open semifinals example. It says that this house believes that liberal democracies should constitutionally enshrine the right of regions to unilaterally secede. Right? You understand? So like every liberal country should, in the constitution, put that regions that want to secede have a right to secede, like unilaterally, right? And this debate can be, we can talk about many examples. You can talk about Catalonia, you can talk about Israel-Palestine, you can talk about Serbia-Kosovo, you can talk about, like, literally any country you can pick up that has constitution, has some regions that want to secede, or did unilaterally seceded, and things like that, right? Now, if you want to make an argument, like if you're making an argument, for example, in a debate, that this matters, that we should talk about situations when there is some sort of hostility between the region that wants to secede and the country that don't allow them, you need to provide some characterization why this is particularly important in this debate. One thing might be to say, look, in most of the cases when both countries agree, like why they're going to secede, etc., they can still do it in status quo. You can give an example like the Serbia and Montenegro, or Czech Republic and Czechia and Slovakia, and things like that. So you can always say, look, in those situations,
have the sense of moral obligation for something that wasn't done.
Okay, let's say that you explain that as well. That you explain even that. Do you think again there's argument something missing? What is the premise of the argument? So the argument goes, we have a moral obligations to help them. And here is why there is moral obligation.
Why should we have?
No, let's say that there is why we should, because we have moral obligations. But there is no answer of why this policy, like sanctuary cities, is helping them, right? This is one of the mistakes that people usually make. That you don't explain, like you say, we have moral obligations to help someone. Usually it is the West towards people that were colonized. Usually this is very often the argument is being made. But you don't never explain how exactly you help them. Okay, so then if you want to improve this argument, you need to either explain how you help them, or to have a moral obligations to provide them with sanctuary cities, regardless of whether it is helpful to them or not, right? What is then the next level how you can improve that argument? Okay, so let's say that we have a moral obligations to do thing X. Let's say that we have moral obligations to do thing Y. How can you compare these two moral obligations?
Why is X better than Y?
Yeah, Y is X better than Y, right? So we need to give us some metric on how we compare these moral obligations. At least something is also, just a second, is happening a lot in this debate. People prove that there is moral obligations to do something, but they never show why it is more important than some other moral obligations. For example, in the example of sanctuary cities, there is probably moral obligations to protect your border and your citizens from harm that might happen from undocumented migrants, right? There is that moral obligation. There is also moral obligations to help migrants because you fucked up their countries. What you need to explain if you want to have this, why particularly one moral obligation is more important than the others. And there are a bunch of ways how we can do this. You can say, look, we have much more coercion on our citizens, and therefore we should just, due to reciprocity, have more moral obligations to them, or we are more obliged to help someone that we can help the most, which are our citizens, rather than the others. Or you can flip it and say we have more obligations to help the most vulnerable people, which are people that live in cartel-around parts of Latin American countries, and therefore we should prioritize those migrants over our population. So we understand how we make those issues. You firstly need to explain why arguments matter, but also why they matter more than either the arguments that other teams are going to run, or that you have idea that they are likely going to run. Sorry, you wanted to add something on this?
No, I just wanted to say compare the impacts.
Yeah, okay. That's exactly what we're talking about, right? Comparing the impacts of those issues can be one of the ways how we can compare it. Okay, so is it so far so good, right? Are there any questions for this? So argument should have the claim, why it is true, and why it is particularly important in this debate. Cool. Now, I'm going to give you now a motion, and we are all collectively going to make an argument. And then we're going to see how we can improve that argument, right? So, the motion that we're going to work on today is this House would ban denial of genocide. It's a very light motion for the Friday evening. This House would ban denial of genocide. Do you understand what debate is about? You're not confused by double negative or something. So, it is forbidden for people to say that genocide didn't happen, or that it didn't happen to a large scale, or something like that. Okay, is there anyone who would like to pick up an argument? It can be for prop or for op that you would like us to make together. Just give us the claim. Yes.
Firstly, denialism, abstractly from genocide, it stops the discussion. So if you just deny the fact, you don't have really to discuss pros and cons about it. So if
that's argument for op or for prop?
For op.
For op, yeah. And what will be the claim of that argument? Let's just go step by step. How would you say, what is the claim of that argument? One sentence that you better explain.
Well, that denialism isn't productive.
And then it is, so, okay, we can make that argument. We can make argument for the proposition that denial of genocide is not productive. It doesn't produce good outcomes, okay? Now, what do you think about that claim? The denial of genocide is not productive. Would you amend that claim? Okay, if I tell you, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to talk to you about how denial of genocide is not productive. Do you have idea what I'm going to talk about? So and so, right? What did we say about claim? It should give us the indication of what we are going to talk about in this debate. Now, is there a way how we can change that claim so that it leads us more, it gives us more idea of what we're going to talk about?
Denial of genocide does not create a real discourse about history, but it just allows countries, for example, to take sides. For example, we would not want the denial of genocide in general because they can deny.
Let's try to think about this from the perspective of real world rather than debate from a moment. In this world, I come out as national television in Serbia and say, you know guys, Srebrenica genocide never happened, Muslims lied about it, they claim that 8,000 people were killed. It's maybe 2,000 or 3,000 people. Most of them were soldiers. There might be some crimes, but they overblow them. They lie that in order to get a separate state. And presumably, there will be someone from the other side of the political spectrum that will come out and say, you guys are lying. Here are the evidence. Here are people who had their relatives killed and slaughtered. Here are like all this overwhelming evidence. What happens in the population? Polarization. Some people believe one politician, some other. Okay, so this is the first step. What is the next step? Whether there are more people who believe the first rather than the other. What do you think? Just think about it. Like, if you are living in post-war countries or war-torn countries, you have a politician that's telling you, you know, we didn't do something as bad as Holocaust, and you have another politician said that you guys did, your members of your community did commit the genocide. Who are you more likely to believe, the former or the latter politician? Sorry? Yes. So, like, and I think that here we are just coming to the more explanation of why this argument is true. One is, if we have both ideas in the public discourse, we are more likely to believe in the idea that makes us feel better about ourselves, particularly if feeling bad about ourselves means that we are basically equals as Nazis, right? At that point, people are more likely to believe in someone who gives them these reasons. Then the opposition might claim, but look guys, this guy is providing evidence why the first guy is a demagogue. What do you answer on that? Is that true that more people will believe in someone who is providing an evidence, facts, testimonies of people, rather than someone who is just demagogue and just yelling at people, no, it's not true? Sorry?
Yeah.
You think so?
I think they would still believe in better version, and that all contrarguments are fabricated or something.
You can all it is just a question who you believe. People rarely look at the evidence or 100-page court verdict about something, right? They just listen to the political talk show. You just choose by your own biases whom you're more likely to believe or not. And this is something that's called confirmation biases. You're more likely to believe to someone that is saying things that you already believe about, right? So if you are leftist and reading leftist media, you're more likely to believe their argumentation and the evidence they present, rather than if you're reading the right wing, and the vice versa, right? What does it mean is basically that even if we have a discussion, people are not going to just analyze them from the rational perspective, but rather to buy into a certain version of truth. And therefore we don't learn from our history, right? What are the more reasons why the claim that if denial of genocide is legal, we don't have a fruitful discussion about that? What are the more reasons for that claim? Why it's true?
Maybe because we feel somehow shame and we don't want to pick it up again and again because it is more likely or more better for ourselves to think it as a past and don't be responsible, don't feel responsible for it.
Yes? What more? Excellent. Are there more reasons why that claim is true? Try to think about the opposite. Try to think of why denial of genocide would have a good discussion about past. And try to see how would you respond on those reasons. Do you think that there is example, because we mentioned examples are also important, that could just help us our case? Is there a country where denial of genocide is illegal?
Turkey, Germany.
Germany? I don't know about Turkey, but I don't think so. At least Armenian genocide. It is illegal to claim that Armenian genocide happened. But yeah, let's keep it for now. Anyway, Germany is a very good example, because denial of Holocaust is illegal in Germany, and there are overwhelming evidence that at least in the West, where it was implemented, in Western Germany, where it was implemented, and where it was like, where people cared about implementing that law, there are no as many neo-Nazis, and people generally feel ashamed about the things that are happening, and they care like about that like not happening again. Even I think you can claim that the fact that Germany received around 1 million refugees, etc., is sort of feeling guilty about certain issues and just providing reparations, etc. I think that also like these narratives come from the fact that people feel guilty about their Nazis. So we have a couple of reasons why this is true. We see an example where it's happening, and we can claim that to some extent our argument is true. Now, third part, why it is important? Why it is important to ban denial of genocide if it is going to mean that with denial of genocide we don't have a fruitful discussion about those issues. Why it is important to have fruitful discussion about genocide?
Because as long as the discussion is to acknowledge the fact that it existed, that is for one. Well, there's the discussion, we can still analyze and find new ways to tell people why it was bad and why it should not happen again and why the reasons behind it happening.
Okay. So I think the first is sort of like circle, but we need to acknowledge that this happened, but like why it is important and it begs the question. But second is important, right? We don't want genocide happening again. That's something that there's probably an impact. If you prove that you are less likely to have genocide happening again, it is very difficult to imagine team from the opposite side claiming, no, but we don't care about that. They didn't show why the argument matters, right? So give us one reason. If people understand what happened and feel guilty about it, it is less likely that they're going to commit it again. What else?
Maybe if there is a discussion, there are more victims appearing, and the people may just feel empathy and something like that, and feel more grounded about it. So it's not like an abstract topic that's about something happens like it happened 100 years ago.
Mm-hmm. So, if I understand correctly, it is the fact that victims deserve some closure they can only get if people recognize that genocide did happen, right? Okay, cool. I think that, so the way how I would attack this argument, for example, would be by asking, okay, but people generally acknowledge that there were crimes happened, but it wasn't the genocide. So they say, look, but there were lots of people killed, that's unfortunate, but it's not genocide. It wasn't a systematic decision by the state to eradicate those people. So why it is important for victims to know that it was systematic, to have the state acknowledge that it was a systematic will of the state to eradicate Jews or Muslims in Bosnia or whoever was genocide.
This is just a reason to give reparations to the situation.
Yeah, excellent. This can be more easily to give reparations to them, but B also because of your identity, because usually a large part of your identity are brought upon the fact that you survived someone trying to eradicate you from the earth, right? So either Jews surviving Holocaust, either Muslim Bosniaks surviving genocide in Bosnia, etc. So it is important because lots of your identity, who you are, and particularly if you're a victim or family of the victim of someone who was killed in the genocide, it is important for you to receive that from the state to get some closure. What are the other reasons why this is important? Yes?
I may suggest that it is also about the forgiveness somehow, because if there is a denial of Holocaust from one side and the victims from the other side, or the people just who accept that happened, and the thing is they don't feel. They never will forgive the other side because they may maybe even compare them to each other.
Excellent. So what you want to say is that basically the chances of integration or basically the reconciliation of different nations is impossible. And I think something that usually people forget in these debates, let's be divergent from the topic, is that usually people forget that it is about reconciliation, that usually it is not because usually when people talk about genocide, the first thing they think about is Germany and Holocaust. Because obvious reasons. And I think that example is specific in many ways. One of them being that Holocaust, unfortunately, at least in German soil, was to a large extent successful, that lots of people who were Jews were killed, but also many of them who survived returned to Israel, which means that people are to a large extent territorially separated. This is not the case, I think, in almost any other examples of genocide you can think about. If you think about Rwanda and Tutsi and Hutus, they live door next to door. If you think about people who killed each other in Bosnia, they also live door next to door. I think it's very important to think about those examples because reconciliation, or how people, like victims, are going to forgive them, or how people who did something bad to them are going to apologize to them or feel guilty about them, is like more likely when they don't have overwhelming narrative telling you that you were right, you didn't commit a genocide. You want to say that?
I just thought about another example. We have in this kind of situation, the killing of the Native Americans by the colonialists from the Netherlands.
Yes. Or from everywhere. They killed natives basically everywhere. Yeah. So that's also the example. But this is like, those are also like probably examples that would have less impact, given that they happened quite a long time ago and that there is some territorial separation, and at the extent like that there is that, like I would say that the issues that Native American, like Native people are facing have much more to do with institutional discrimination within those countries rather than denial of genocide and things like that, right? And also I think that like in those situations there is not as much as denial of genocide as much as like there is no discussion at all, because it was again unfortunately very successful in many situations. Like, do you think that there are ways how we can improve this argument? What do you think? Or do you think this is the best argument you can deliver ever in the world and deserves 95 speakers points? And now we can win every debate about genocide did. Okay. I'll ask you the question. So first question is, what is the premise of this argument? You know what premise is? The premise is like assumption, one sentence or two, upon which argument is predicated. If that sentence is not true, then simply all the argument is false. It has to do with something that I think you said before. So, what is the premise of this argument? The argument said with denial of genocide. So, without, yeah. So with denial.
Genocide provoke talking about it, not talking about it. Like this is the question which we.
So yeah, this is one of the things. So okay, excellent. One of the things is, so we maybe proved that with the denial of genocide, we don't have truthful discussion. What we didn't prove is that without denial of genocide, we do have truthful discussion. Are you aware that those things are not the same claim? This is very important because people usually make these mistakes. So if we showed you that okay, if I claim that with rain I cannot have a fun time, that still doesn't mean that without rain I will have fun time. Maybe I'll be still grungy and bitching about something else. Okay? So this is the case. Like, we proved that without denial of genocide, that with denial of genocide we don't have truthful discussion. What we didn't prove is that without denial of genocide we do have truthful discussion. This is also part of the argument that should have been explained in the same way as the former has been explained. And I would suggest that it can be explained by doing all the time comparisons. So, when denial of genocide is allowed, you have right-wing people saying these things, people believing these things. Without them, you still have some discussion. For example, because the international community demands that you talk about those issues, because you have some liberal politicians, because you also have some right-wing politicians that are discussing those issues, but they're not allowed to say that genocide didn't happen, but rather they need to start from that presumption that genocide did happen. So this is the one way how we can improve this argument. What else?
We need to realize if our goal is to prevent genocide from happening again, or to, as we said, reach reconciliation, and that's all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but I mean, you claim from this argument you achieve both things, right? That you don't have genocide happening again, but also better reconciliation. I mean, these are the two things that we want to achieve. But what else? What else is the premise of the argument? That without a denial of genocide, we don't have denial. That with denial of genocide being prohibited, we don't have denial of genocide. So, for example, if debate is this house would legalize drugs. Very easy debate. I mean, debate that you all heard lots of time about. One of the things that probably everyone is going to talk about is, you know what, people use drugs anyway, right? And this is a safer way to use them. Do you think that this is applicable to this situation?
If we ban the denial of genocide, there will still be people that deny genocide.
Yes?
And maybe they will somehow radicalize because they will feel somehow oppressed by the society.
Mm-hmm. What else?
It's reverse psychology. The more we try to silence someone, the more people want to listen to them.
Okay, so there are a couple of reasons why we can claim that denial of genocide will happen anyway. If I come from the opening position and explain that, then your argumentation that is based upon the premise that is without denial of genocide being prohibited, we don't have it in society, then that argument is true. Then the argument is false, right? And there are many ways how we can do it. A bunch of them being already said by you, right? But usually for people who are extreme, if they're going to, what's going to happen to them? I go and say, you know what, they cried about genocide. What happens to them? They get fined. So what? If they really think that they need to defend their identity against the label of being genocidal nation, for some people it will be the price they'll be ready to pay. So what we need to do to improve this argument, to explain, either why when denial of genocide is banned, we don't have denial of genocide, or B, what I would suggest is to take a smaller burden, that to a larger extent we have much less denial of genocide. And I think the latter claim can be explained. Can you give me now explanation on this part of the argument? Why, when denial of genocide is prohibited, we have to a large extent less denial of genocide?
Because if there will be a person that will deny genocide after the motion has been said, we would most probably arrest him, because arrest for this kind of situation isn't enough type of punishment. Yeah, it's enough punishment to silence him and the other bottom groups, because people would not want to talk about something that would make them arrested.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's fear.
So one thing is fear of being arrested. It works for many people. Maybe extreme people will still deny it, but for most of the people, now everyone can deny it. It is politically favorable for you to say that genocide didn't happen because the right-wing people will vote for you. Now, that political points are put in calculation with the fact that you might go to jail, which is usually a large deterrent for lots of people because jails are hostile. Secondly, what else? Is there something about ongoing denial of genocide? So in the status quo, I come out and say genocide didn't happen. And then there is some debate, you're stupid, you're a liar, there are evidence, blah, blah, blah. But then I continue with my propagation. I have whole conspiracy theories, I rant about it, I'm very funny so that people invite me to guests to be at the TV shows, etc. Media have more views because of that. People vote for me maybe some because of that, etc., etc. Maybe if it is prohibited, I will be able to come out and say genocide didn't happen. But then, media will be afraid to invite me over and over again because now I'm a criminal. B, the politicians will have incentives to just say, look, what the fuck you're talking about? It is prohibited in our country. It's one of the very important things in our constitution, whatever. So therefore, I'm not having ongoing propagation of these ideas. So they're not only pushing those ideas in the media rather than not having continuing talks about that. Thirdly, you can say, look, it is true that someone on Reddit might write about those conspiracy theories, but most people don't Google Reddit threads about denial of genocide, but rather watch conventional media. If at conventional media you're not allowed to come out and talk about those issues, it is much, like on the comparison, we have much less denial of genocide. Fourthly, if denial of genocide is legal, when you're in the TV show with the person that claims that genocide did in fact happen, then at that point, your ideas are seen as both equally legitimate and as a debate that is sort of a balance rather than as a debate between a lunatic and someone who has a reasonable goal. So these are the things, and of course we can analyze this more, but it is important to also to focus on the argumentation. So one thing is to see what are the premise of your arguments and whether the premise of your argument is proven. Now, of course, never an argument can be fully proven, but you can prove the premise if you think that there is a way from the opposite team that they're going to attack you. Then preemptively, you're going to be better than them. So it means that if you're prime minister and you give this explanation why we have to a larger extent less denial of genocide, and if you have first opposition, where leader opposition is very keen to tell you that some people will still deny genocide, then that claim is ridiculous compared to this analysis, unless he has a very good analysis of claiming why the extent to which denial of genocide is going to happen will still produce those harms. You know what I'm saying? So they need to have equally good analysis as you do. So the way how you can improve your argumentation is firstly, think about the premises of those arguments that are going to exist. Does that make sense? Cool. What else do you think can be improved in this argument? Fantastic.
In which exactly?
Sorry?
In which exactly?
In this about that without denial of genocide we do have fruitful discussion, why with denial of genocide we don't have fruitful discussion. So one thing that someone objected about is the implication or impacts of the argument, right? And they were so one thing that you said, for example, was that we want to prevent genocide from happening ever again. Do you think that prohibiting right-wing people to claim that it was a genocide is enough warrant that we don't have genocide in the future? Why do you think the genocide happened in the first place?
Because there were a group of people that hated another group of people very much.
Yes.
And
usually
the same group of people stopped existing because of the first.
Because the first got weapons and power over the second. Yes. And usually that hatred is not only predicated on the fact whether the politicians from the first group are going to say that genocide exists or doesn't exist. What else were the implications? One was about forgiveness of the victims, right? So, just put yourself in the position of someone whose family was killed just for being a member of a certain nation, religion, doesn't matter really. It's really difficult for you to forgive someone simply because they are not telling you that they didn't do what they did, right? I mean, necessary condition for forgiveness is that they claim we did something bad, right? We committed genocide, but even if they claim that, still you might feel, okay, then you should go to jail, and we should never meet again, and you should be paid us reparation, and my future kids should never interact with your kids, and also in 10 next generations, right? That's also something that presumably victims can say. Now, we can move on with the other impact that we had, and all the reasons why the argument is important. What I want to stress out here is that usually people think about impacts as something abstract, right? As something that as a huge abstract ideas, which is, good in terms of generating arguments. But I think that you should try to be as specific as possible of what you are, two advice here. One, to be as specific as possible of what exactly you are achieving. So I would not say necessarily that we are having much more forgiveness and much less genocide in the future, but maybe to say that on the comparison, people are sooner or likely going to accept the others and interact with others more positively. It's a smaller burden, right, than less genocide, and if proven, less genocide is probably stronger than better interactions, but this is much easier to prove and much harder to deny that it's going to happen, right? So I think that one of the things should be to try to take smaller burdens that you can prove rather than bigger burdens that you cannot prove. The second advice that I would like to give here, particularly, is that you should be as concrete as possible in what things are going to happen. Because we are having much more reconciliation. It sounds good for an article or for a philosophical essay, but what does it mean really in people's lives? And I think what happens in this is to try to put yourself in the perspective of the most relevant stakeholder and think about how exactly they would react. I have 5 more minutes, right? Okay. I think that this can help you a lot in thinking of to trying to concretize your impacts. What does it mean if you're a Bosnian person that had family slaughtered and killed, if the genocide, if there are always writing people telling you that they didn't commit genocide, etc. At that point, when you're how do you feel as that person, and how that changes when they are not allowed to deny those issues. So try to concretize those issues and try to take smaller burdens if you cannot take bigger ones. Are there any questions for these issues? Cool. So there are also other ways how you could improve every argument, right? I think couple of these issues are a good starting position, and I think it's generally I prefer to give people less advice and try to firstly you just focus on them rather than just to give you so many things and then you feel have an urge to need to improve everything. But in terms of argumentation, I think that there are a couple of things that you should, after this workshop, try all of you to remember. Firstly, parts of the arguments. Claim should be something short that tells you, or to tell the judge, you are not important, judge is important because they are giving you points. You should tell the judge with your claim what exactly are you going to prove. Judge should know, at least, in some sense, what you're going to talk for next 2 or 3 minutes. It helps them follow you, and also it helps you with the clarity because you know what is the most important thing you need to prove. Secondly, why the argument is true. Again, to repeat something that Melda was also talking about, focus on the things that are going to be contested rather than things that are obvious. Claiming, you know what, genocide is very bad, it's very easy to prove and I can talk about it 40 minutes. But the other speaker will come out say, I agree, you didn't do anything. Focus on the things that are going to be contested. Thirdly, why argument is particularly important, try to focus on the things that, why argument is more important than the others. Either why it is the most important things in the debate, or for example, reconciliation is the most important thing in the debate because people will proceed to live there in the future. If they are still going to vote for politicians along the ethnic lines, like they do, for example, in Bosnia, then probably you're not doing much of a good things. But if they are going to just overcome those conflicts and have much better relations, it's much better. We have a better society. And then the way how you can improve your own arguments, but also think about how if someone didn't do these things, how we can attack their arguments very effectively, is firstly, the premise of the argument. Is there a thing that we predicated our argument upon that is maybe hidden, maybe not as obvious, that you could attack, or the other thing might attack, that you should build more analysis there? Think about those issues, and also when you're doing rebuttal, think on other people's arguments or cases, think about their premises and whether you can attack them. Secondly, about impacts, whether they are as concrete as possible, whether someone will, because if you say we're going to have less genocide, judge can say, you know what, I didn't buy that, because genocide happened for other reasons and we don't know what the impact of your argument is. If you have as concrete as possible what you are changing, judge cannot say I didn't buy, they can, but then they are very, very bad judges and there's nothing you can do, so it's tough luck. And thirdly, try to take the burdens that you can prove rather than huge burdens. It is not important to show that, this is Latin, this is not important to show that the world peace is going to arrive after every debate, but it is important that the argument that you provided, actually you are sure that you proved. I think these are advice that help, or things that when I realized helped me a lot in improving my argumentation, and therefore I think that you should, at this competition and the next competition, think about those issues when you make things when you make arguments in order to make them stronger. Are there any questions for this workshop? Cool. So we didn't have much time to discuss this second part, but anyway, hopefully some next time I can deliver that workshop or something like that. Thanks for your attention and see you tomorrow at the competition.